Trump slammed Europe with a 15% tariff and threatened 30 if they dared resist. Ursula von der Leyen rushed into a deal, pledging $750 billion in U.S. energy and wiping tariffs for American imports. But here's the shock. Bloomberg reports the U.S. doesn't even produce enough energy to meet that promise. Reuters says German car exports have already collapsed 40% under Trump's tariffs. And now, in Strasbourg, lawmakers are jeering von der Leyen, holding up placards reading, "Sovereignty isn't for sale." Washington calls it victory. Brussels calls it survival. The real question: what happens when Europe runs out of concessions? Across the Atlantic, Donald Trump framed the deal very differently. At a campaign-style rally in Ohio on July 18, 2025, he waved a folder marked "Trade Win" and told the crowd, "Europe begged us for mercy, and America gave them a fair deal. We win, they lose." For Trump, it was political theater. For von der Leyen, it was damage control. The core terms were stark. According to Reuters, Trump had already imposed a 15% tariff on European goods entering the U.S., up from less than 3% under his predecessors. He had threatened to go further, warning of a 20% tariff on what he called Liberation Day, and even floated a 30% rate in a July letter to Brussels. To prevent escalation, Brussels agreed to 3 sweeping concessions. Media, European Union officials negotiating at conference table, Brussels officials in meeting room, 0 tariffs on most U.S. imports, a pledge to buy $750 billion in American energy and $40 billion in U.S.-made semiconductors over 3 years, and a promise of $600 billion in new European investment in America by 2028. The Wall Street Journal noted on August 2, 2025, that Washington had offered no parallel concessions. Europe gave ground, America took it. From the moment details emerged, the math didn't add up. Eurostat data showed EU imports of U.S. energy totaled just $85 billion in 2024. To meet the $750 billion target, Brussels would need to triple annual purchases to roughly $250 billion. Yet U.S. Census Bureau data recorded total American energy exports of only $166 billion globally in 2024. Even if every barrel and cubic foot went to Europe, the pledge was unreachable. The investment commitments looked equally unrealistic. IMF statistics revealed EU foreign direct investment outflows totaled $840 billion in 2024. Redirecting $600 billion of that to the U.S. alone would mean sidelining Asia, Africa, and Latin America, regions European leaders have publicly called strategic priorities. Analysts at Bloomberg describe the numbers as aspirational at best, performative at worst. Von der Leyen's aides quietly suggested this was the point. By making promises that couldn't legally be enforced, they argued, Brussels had secured breathing room without binding industry to impossible costs. But this raised its own question. If commitments were never meant to be honored, was Europe buying peace or simply renting it? The backlash inside Europe was immediate. On August 21st, Teresa Ribera, the Commission's executive vice president, told the Financial Times that Brussels should be ready to walk away if Washington kept pushing on digital regulations. Trump had demanded revisions to the Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act, both designed to limit the dominance of U.S. tech firms in Europe. He even hinted at new tariffs or sanctions against countries enforcing them. For Ribera, this was a red line. Days later, Antonio Costa, president of the European Council, admitted at the Bled Strategic Forum in Slovenia that Ukraine security concerns had shaped the talks. His candor cut through von der Leyen's careful messaging. "Our partners must know the EU will always defend its sovereignty," he declared, implicitly rebuking any impression that Brussels had traded away independence for short-term security guarantees. The deal's survival now hinged on Parliament. On September 1st, the Socialists and Democrats group, second largest in the chamber, announced they would vote against tariff reductions. Without them, von der Leyen could only rely on her usual allies, the European People's Party, Renew Europe, and the Greens. Together, they held 318 seats in the 720-member assembly. A majority requires 361. Even if she convinced smaller blocs, the numbers were tight. The stakes were not abstract. Trump's 27.5% tariff on European cars had already cut German exports by 40% in the first half of 2025, according to German customs data. The VDA, Germany's powerful automotive lobby, warned on September 4th that prolonged tariffs could cost 150,000 jobs across the EU. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire told Le Monde that Europe cannot be reduced to a marketplace for American energy and weapons. Each statement chipped away at von der Leyen's fragile coalition. Meanwhile, Trump doubled down. At a rally in Florida on August 29th, he told supporters, "The EU folded once, they'll fold again. If they don't, we'll double the tariffs." The Wall Street Journal reported that energy executives from ExxonMobil and Chevron privately lobbied the White House to lock in European commitments, even though analysts doubted U.S. production could meet them. The midpoint revelation was, honestly, unavoidable. The trade deal wasn't just flawed in execution, it was structurally impossible. The Commission simply lacks the legal authority to force companies to buy American goods or redirect investments. Even if Parliament approved the tariff reductions, enforcement of the grand commitments was, well, beyond Brussels' reach. This exposed a fundamental question. What exactly had von der Leyen signed? If the promises were unenforceable, the deal started to look like a political gesture to placate Trump and buy time. But gestures, as we know, carry consequences. If Washington decided Europe had acted in bad faith, retaliation could extend beyond tariffs into financial sanctions. If European lawmakers rejected the deal, Brussels' credibility as a negotiator would be undermined. The IMF's September 2025 trade outlook estimated that an escalation of U.S. EU disputes could shave 0.7 percentage points off Eurozone GDP in 2026. European exporters were already bracing for more pain. Italy's steel industry warned in Corriere della Sera that new U.S. tariffs had cut orders by 30%. Spanish agricultural producers faced sudden price hikes after retaliatory levies on olive oil and wine. Inside the Commission, frustration grew. Bloomberg reported on September 3rd that senior officials privately admitted there was no mechanism to enforce energy or investment pledges. One diplomat told the outlet, "We avoided today's fire only to light tomorrow's fuse." In early September, von der Leyen faced a stormy session in Strasbourg. Socialist lawmakers heckled her opening remarks, demanding she explain why Europe was committing billions to American energy while domestic renewable projects stalled. Green MEPs held up placards reading, "Sovereignty isn't for sale." The scene really underscored her isolation, a president defending a deal her chamber increasingly viewed as indefensible. While Brussels wrestled with parliamentary math, Wall Street began, calculating profits. According to Bloomberg on September 14, 2025, U.S. liquefied natural gas exporters saw futures contracts surge 22% in anticipation of Europe's promised purchases, even though physical capacity remained capped. Hedge funds quickly piled into energy-linked derivatives, betting that even a half-fulfilled pledge would push American producers into a new export boom. European industries, meanwhile, were already diverting capital in anticipation of Trump's tariffs. Reuters reported on September 15th that Volkswagen had accelerated plans to build a second factory in Tennessee, bypassing the tariffs by producing cars inside the United States. Airbus executives told the Wall Street Journal that they were reviewing whether to expand assembly in Mobile, Alabama, rather than risk higher U.S. import duties on planes built in Toulouse. This shift raised an uncomfortable question. Was the trade deal less about transatlantic cooperation and more about relocating Europe's crown industries onto American soil? The IMF warned that if relocation accelerated, Europe risked hollowing out high-value manufacturing while subsidizing American growth. At the same time, financial flows told a revealing story. Data from the European Central Bank showed that euro-to-dollar transactions surged by nearly 18% in August, the sharpest monthly spike since 2008. Analysts interpreted it as companies front-loading contracts in case tariffs expanded further. For Brussels, the signal was unmistakable. Business was already hedging against political instability, treating the deal not as a lifeline, but as a countdown to deeper fragmentation. The broader consequences stretch beyond Brussels. China's state media framed the turmoil as proof that Europe lacked autonomy in trade policy. Russian outlets claimed Europe had sacrificed economic independence for U.S. security guarantees. Even allies such as Japan quietly questioned whether Brussels could negotiate credible agreements without unraveling from within. By mid-September, the script had flipped. A deal once touted as a shield now looked like a trigger. If Parliament rejected it, Europe would endure tariffs and political humiliation. If it approved it, Brussels would be locked into commitments it could not deliver. Either path weakened the EU's position. Trump sensed the leverage. In an unscripted remark on September 10th, he told reporters outside the White House, "If they don't like the deal, fine. Then we'll just slap 30% on everything. Cars, wine, cheese, whatever. America's got the upper hand." The message was clear: concession only invites more pressure. For von der Leyen, the gamble was survival. According to the Financial Times, she had already staked her presidency on pushing the deal through. Losing the vote could shatter her authority months before the next commission cycle. Winning it could secure temporary calm, but at the cost of credibility. In the end, the story of the U.S. EU trade deal may not hinge on whether tariffs fall or rise. It may hinge on whether Europe accepts a new reality, that negotiating with Washington under Trump means paying in sovereignty as well as money. And if bending once brings no relief, the question lingers over Brussels like a shadow. What happens when there's nothing left to give? We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.